Okay, welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. Today, a really great video for you guys, brought to you in part by Belmont Watches. They actually did lend in this beautiful Tudor Black Bay 58 Blue, and I'll be comparing it next to the Sinn U50 and, of course, the Seiko SBDC 101 or SPB 143, depending on where you're located. Now, these three watches have kind of... for me, I was inspired actually by James Stacy. Posted a picture back when, I want to say when these watches, well, I'd say maybe it was the Seiko and the Sinn were relatively new to the market, and he kind of captured a picture of all three of them together. They are very comparable, and I think what's so fascinating about these three is that they're also extremely different. Although one is a 39mm, one is a 41, and one is a 40.5mm. So they also, of course, are all dive watches, and they're all from, you know, pretty legit brands, right? Each brand has its own form of street cred, and in terms of their makeup and the way that they have been produced, there's also a lot of differences there as well. Even the design aesthetics are really quite different for each of these, whether it be more of a retro reissue or a modern reinterpretation, or just a completely modern watch from start to finish. So that really captivated me. Of course, also, these are ultra-wearable dive watches, Swiss, German, and Japanese. So there you go with even more things to compare and contrast. So again, big shout out to Belmont Watches. Thank the team from over there for sending in, of course, this Tudor for me to get some hands-on with, so I compare it to my personal Sinn and Seiko. So with all that said, let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get these pieces in hand, and take a closer look. Okay, guys, now these are all fantastic pieces. For me, of course, I own two of them, and I don't own the most expensive one, so that might tell you a little bit about it. So we'll start off, of course, with this great watch and what it has to offer, and a little bit about the pricing. This one is the most expensive at $39.50 MSRP, but you can get it for $31.50 from Belmont Watches here in San Diego. It has a 39mm diameter, is only 11.7mm thick, and has a 47.5mm lug to lug, which makes it very, very wearable. Some other details include a boxed domed sapphire crystal, which is beautifully done and just flows aesthetically really beautifully. You're getting a 60 click bezel here with just beautiful action. Once it gets going, it gets going. One of the nicer 60 click bezel actions I felt, but honestly, when you start getting into 60 click bezel actions, typically the more expensive versions of it will typically be better, and this is nice. Although I will say, in terms of the grip, you know, there's not a lot of overhang there, so you really are using the coin edge there for traction. But it is very pronounced and very smooth, so I think really well balanced in terms of, you know, bezel action. Then when we get into some of the other details, the movement inside is going to be Swiss manufacturer caliber MT 5402, which is a COSC certified chronometer movement. It has a 70-hour power reserve and beats at 4 Hertz, which is 8 ticks per second. Getting into that dial, you're getting applied indices, matte blue finish, of course, there, polished hands, and then, of course, an unspecified lume that does glow green and does render very nice and white, you know, in daylight, as you can see here. You're getting 20mm lugs, which is great. 200 meters of water resistance. You're getting a very solid, fully milled clasp here, as you can see. Although, you know, technically this section right here could actually be, you know, maybe not milled. This actually could just be folded, the folding section here, but it does a nice job. And then another thing is they do have the great ceramic balls, so when this thing opens and closes, it is very, very smooth. So I do like that a lot. You're also getting manual micro adjust there, and of course just a pretty nice shape, everything nicely signed, very, very handsome. So this is a very nice watch. Of course, you can buy this right now from Belmont Watches, depending on when you're watching this. Hopefully it's still available, and you can click add to cart, because this is really a stunning piece, and I can see why so many people purchase this watch. Now, getting into the Sinn, This is probably one of the lesser in terms of these three, the least popular model, but it's also one of probably more polarizing. There's probably more people that love this watch versus a lot of people that like either of these two. Now, getting into the Sinn, of course, they're out of Germany, founded back in 1961. This is a very respectable mid-tier German brand founded by the flight instructor Helmut Sinn. This is the U50T, which is for Tegimented, and it's a smaller take on Sinn's U series line. These go for $3,010, fully Tegimented case, and on that fully Tegimented steel bracelet, that's the MSRP. Of course, you could probably get them for a little bit cheaper used, and because of the Tegimented, nature of this, if you were to buy one used, it'd probably be in pretty good condition. This has a 41 millimeter diameter, is only 11.2 millimeters thick, so this is actually the thinnest out of the bunch, and it actually has the highest depth rating at 500 meters of water resistance, so that's really, really nice. The lug to lug is 47.3, so again, a little bit smaller from that dimension versus the Tudor, and it's made out of German submarine steel, which has been Tegimented and bead blasted. You're getting a flat sapphire with double AR, which is going to be on the underside and the outer side, so it's really going to have the clearest, most legible crystal out of the bunch, but the crystal is definitely, not a feature, whereas it might be on the two other watches where you get to see this beautiful crystal with nice curves and everything here. The crystal is just doing its best to disappear, and man, does it. It is just gorgeous. This dial, everything is just so sharp, so different, but some might think aesthetically this feels a little bit cartoony, which I can totally understand as well. You're also going to get a 60 click bezel. Ooh, this one is going to be a lot more audible. There's slightly more play though, but not bad. Like, that's definitely an exceptional 60 click action. But for the money, for about $3 grand, that's what you would kind of expect. Inside, this is the only watch that doesn't have an in-house movement. It has a Sellita SW300-1, which has an upgraded 56-hour power reserve and beats at 4 hertz, which is very, very nice. Solid case back, 20 millimeter lugs, drilled lugs, everything solid here. The connectors are going to be screw in, but you can see it is a particular tool, not a regular screwdriver. That's going to be like the hex, like an Allen key there for those versus the standard screwdriver, and then pin and collar for the Seiko. So this one definitely leans more extremely onto the functional side versus, which is going to make it give up some of the versatility that these two watches have in terms of day-to-day wear. Now, getting to probably the most popular of these, just because of its affordability, you're getting to the Seiko SBDC 101, which is the JDM nomenclature, or us here, internationally or within the US, know it as the SPB 143. Seiko, founded back in 1881, Japanese in origin, factories throughout Asia, covering all market segments. And this is something that is, has been really a huge splash because they really upgraded two things: the pricing and the quality, right? So a lot of people knew Seiko for those under $300 dive watches, mechanical, a lot of great ones, but that was like 20 years ago. So as they've evolved and advanced, now you get these great watches that are available but are closer to $1,000. This one being at $1,200 MSRP, but of course you can always get it cheaper. It is a Seiko. In terms of which one you're going to get biggest discount on, I'd say you could probably get this one off of the biggest discount off of MSRP in terms of brand new. It has a 40 millimeter diameter, 40 and a half, but it's 40 millimeters across the bezel. This is the thickest at 13.8 millimeters thick, but it also does employ the most tricks in terms of making it appear thinner by having that high polished bevel on top and underneath, which is going to really thin out that mid case visually. It also has a 47.5 millimeter lug to lug, so very close to what you're going to see from the other watches. And then getting into, of course, the bezel, it's 120 clicks. This is going to be a lot smoother and less clicky. So for those of you that really can find some of the clickier bezels a little bit more jarring, this one you're going to probably enjoy a little bit more just because it's very smooth, but it still does have nice tactile clicks in it. Definitely, you know, much better than your average Seiko SKX or Seiko Turtle. Ooh, definitely very nice. This is 120 clicks though, so it's probably generally a little bit easier to dial one of these in versus a 60 click. You can see lines up pretty nicely, and none of these have ceramic bezel inserts. This has a steel bezel insert. If we can get it to focus there, that has been coated and brushed. We have an aluminum bezel insert on the Tudor, and then we have a Tegimented steel solid bezel, so there's no inserts. The whole bezel is one piece on the Sinn. Again, getting into the movement that's powering this one, you're getting the in-house, fully in-house. So this is the most in-house movement, but it also is the lowest spec with the 40, I'm sorry, with the 6R35 movement with a 70-hour power reserve, which is nice and extended. 70 hours is good. It does equal the Tudors, but it's going to be at a lower beat rate. So that frequency is going to be only 6 ticks per second or 3 hertz, which means that it is going to be, you know, on the positive side, less wear and tear. On the other side, it's, you know, typically going to be a little bit less accurate, and people do seem to have issues with these movements from time to time. I've had very good luck, but because of how many people buy these watches, how many loud people buy these watches, you're going to get a lot of feedback in terms of, hey, people have had problems. But there's also probably, out of these watches, the one that's been produced the most is going to be this. So there's more examples out there. So let's say you know, the 10% lemon rate on this is going to be a lot more watches than 10% lemons on this one in terms of the movement. But these are also you know, in group versus you know, just straight up in-house, where the Seiko is going to be fully in-house. So there's that. And also, even as these are running here, these all started at the same time, but you can see the Tudor is running very slow by comparison, which is very surprising to me. And it's one of those things where that's the one thing, right? If you have one that works and runs really well, you'll have one that works and runs really well. But if you don't, then you have this in-house movement now that isn't necessarily going to be as easy to get serviced or looked at as another. I don't know if it's because my watches are running a little bit fast or this one is running that much slower, but that is why they are not perfectly synced up right now. But these are really great watches. Of course, Swiss, Japanese, German, great examples. For me, I could buy these two watches instead of just buying this one because of the price differential on there, and that might be enough for you or not. So before we get these on the wrist, let's go ahead, take a pause, and get a quick word from today's sponsor in terms of this video. Are you looking for an aftermarket watch dealer that you can trust? Well, look no further. Definitely check out Belmont Watches locally here in sunny San Diego. I've personally purchased watches from them, whether they be new or used, or even getting an old family heirloom serviced through their local networks. They've been a huge supporter of the channel, and I just want to make sure to pay that back, and they're proudly sponsoring this particular episode. Let's go ahead and see what they have available in this week's haul. Wow. So as you can see, we're gonna see some really cool Grail level watches here, and you're gonna always have all of that pertinent information posted, as well as some high definition photography for you to drool over while you make up your mind. And if that watch doesn't scratch the itch, then you can see what else they have in their inventory. So whether you're just browsing or you're looking for something in particular, I definitely recommend the guys at Belmont Watches. They do outstanding work, and they're always happy to talk shop. So with that said, let's go ahead and get back to the segment. All right, and we're back. So as you can see, really fantastic on the wrist, which is one of the reasons why people love this watch so much. And you can see even at its thicker size, it does negotiate its visual weight really well, thanks to those undercuts and of course high polished bevels on the mid case. So very nice, still wears relatively flat even with that single domed sapphire, but now comparable to the Tudor, as you can see, very nice, absolutely on the slimmer side. But because of the higher dome there and the more slab side on that case, right, what you're getting is a very thin coin edge bezel and then a slab case. So even though it is thinner physically, visually, it's not going to, you know, be pulling as many tricks, which I guess you could also say it doesn't have to. Also, aesthetically, this is going to, of course, be more in line with a more vintage watch, especially with those great faux rivets there, which some people hate, but I think they definitely suit the watch. And if they get rid of them in the future, I don't mind that either. But I think, you know, especially with the dial and of course that outer track having the circular finish all the way around versus just tick marks, for me, I feel like that really signifies a more vintage style, especially of course with the unguarded crown there. So very handsome, very nice. Quick comparison there, you can see they definitely wear very similarly, of course at much different price points. This one you can get for well under $1,000, you know, 800, upper 700s now, brand new, depending on the dealer and the exchange rate. If you're buying it from Canada at a discount or buying it from Japan at a discount, there's definitely discounts out there. So with that, let's go ahead very quickly get the Sinn on wrist as well. Okay guys, as you can see, definitely a lot more modern. And look at how slim this thing is. Now this is physically the slimmest. It doesn't quite pull over the extra tricks that the Seiko does, but it really doesn't have to because of how slim it is. Also, the proportions where you have such a slim mid case with a slightly thicker bezel also do visually spread the weight really well, which is very nice in this case. So I really dig that. And let's go ahead now and kind of compare both of these on the wrist. Of course, definitely going to be more vintage vibes, a lot more versatile at the same time, but then we get over here to be, you know, a little bit more brutalist, minimalist, in your face, very function forward, and of course a lot louder with those pops of red throughout. I mean, they're nice pops, don't get me wrong, but clearly this is going to be a little bit less versatile in terms of trying to blend it with, you know, your attire for the night or whatever event you're going to. So that is really going to be the main trade-off. And I think here you're going to have something where they're going to be a spread across two different kind of, you know, sections where you're going to be very true to form, vintage style, very true to form, modern contemporary, and then something that is a little bit more in between here in terms of having, of course, a very classic aesthetic, but having also a lot of modern nuances that make it very wearable, you know, as well as capable. So with that said, let's actually finish this out with some loom shots, low light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. All right, as you can see, these are all dive watches and they all hold their own, honestly, to the naked eye. They're not going to be too different. I will say that, you know, not looking through the flip out screen, I would say that the Seiko has a bit of a slight punch advantage in that initial brightness, but you can see they're all lasting quite long. Also, the Tudor has a lot of loom in terms of the surface area. It has larger, fatter hands with that snowflake style. Also, you know, the loom plops themselves are also quite large. The disadvantage would go to the Sinn, although it does have the brightest, strongest 12 o'clock lume pip there, which is fantastic from a functional perspective. Of course, these are just printed indices versus the raised indices on the Seiko or the applied indices on the Tudor. So because of that, you're going to have a thinner application in general, typically, although I think it's applied very well, and compared to other Sinn watches, the U50 definitely excels, and it's the same thing for that bezel action. It definitely does a bit better than previous iterations. But one thing I always like to work in, of course, is some low light transition. Cristiano is going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to find yourself coming in and out of buildings, walking underneath overhangs, maybe hanging out underneath the shade of a tree. So it's nice to see what these colors, finishes, and textures render like in less than optimal lighting, to even include maybe some harsh lighting that could expose any type of factory defects. And all these watches have been worn and are, you know, worn watches, whether they be my personal Sinn and Seiko or this, you know, nicely aftermarket used a Tudor here that's available, of course, for purchase from Belmont Watches. But you can see there's a lot of play in terms of the finishing on the Seiko. You get, of course, sunray dial, and then you're also getting that finish on the bezel. So some of you might really like that, and it might also make the watch feel a little bit more expensive than it actually is, because it is the cheapest by comparison. But you can see the Sinn has really no play, which I think is fantastic, apart from the matte surfaces on that Tegimented case and bracelet, which do look fantastic. I do like that level of play, but that dial is just really stark and high definition, and it just remains ultimately legible regardless of the lighting condition. Whereas you get now into the Tudor, it's definitely more subdued versus the Seiko, but it is a brighter color in the blue here. So you're gonna get a couple different plays on that blue, and of course your eye is gonna want to match it a little bit more, and it's not always gonna be matching because it's two matte colors, so they're gonna reflect in different ways. Similarly, though, the Seiko doesn't even really try to match by having more of a gray dial with a black bezel insert. So they all look great, of course, and they are different styles, different, you know, different brands. And if getting into brands, some of you are probably upset that I forgot to talk about Tudor, which was founded by Hans Willdorf back in 1926 as an affordable alternative to the Rolex brand. Now, for me, that is a double-edged sword, right? Because yes, it was founded by the same people who founded Rolex. Everyone loves Rolex. They're the most desirable luxury brand that are out there, and they own a third of the market share of all Swiss luxury watches, which is a lot of watches. But at the same time, it's always been, from its very inception, has never meant to be the best. It's always been an affordable alternative, which may turn some people off, versus a Sinn, which maybe it doesn't have that same in-house nature because of its third-party movement, has always been meant to push the absolute pinnacle when it comes to technology and what Sinn can do. Every Sinn is really a calling card for how good Sinn are, whereas you know, a Tudor really is a calling card for how much an affordable alternative, how good that could be to a Rolex. It's never meant to outdo Rolex. Seiko is somewhere in the middle because they do have different tiers. They have sub-brands, right? You're getting Prospex versus just a Spirit or collection watch. So with that, it's going to be a little bit more expensive, and they have it kind of within an appropriate range in terms of what they're targeting. It doesn't necessarily have to be the end all be all, but I think a lot of people see this watch as kind of the perfect affordable dive watch. It has street cred, it has horological significance, and it's, you know, it's respectable from whether it be a hardcore collector or just, you know, your more common kind of passerby. So there's a lot to kind of chew on there, and it's tough to say. But for me, of course, you guys saw, I chose to buy the Sinn and the Seiko versus having one Tudor for the same amount of money. Would I still love to add this Tudor to my collection? Absolutely, yes. And do I still plan to? I think so. Honestly, this watch is, although it's probably the best diver under $4,000 in terms of kind of meeting a lot of broad wickets, it's also probably the best diver under 5 or 6 because I personally, and many folks, still will choose to buy this over an Omega Seamaster Professional, which is pretty wild, right? Some of you are probably banging the screen right now saying, no, an Omega S&P is better in every way. You're right, it is better in every way, except for the fact that more people want this, it seems. I think the design, the aesthetic, and ultimately, you're not buying a spec sheet, right? So you can end up enjoying a watch with aluminum bezel insert, and you know, a lot more than maybe one that has a ceramic one. If you don't like the way it looks, then you're not going to wear it. So I think that's also something that goes underappreciated, and I think these three watches do pair so well to kind of together. And if somebody had all three of these watches in their collection, I could see them also wearing them in different occasions. But definitely let me know what you guys think in the comments below. I think these are all great pieces. You really can't go wrong with either. If you really just want a solid dive watch, of course the Seiko is a great choice, especially for the money. If you really want that teched out, everything under the sun, just a real triumph in terms of modern engineering, get the Sinn. If you want something that's just going to have a lot of crossover appeal in terms of, hey, you will never go wrong, no one's ever going to clown you for wasting money on a Tudor, versus some people might hate on your tag, Aqua Racer, but pretty much anybody who sees this today, it's a solid choice. Great history, great background. Is it ever going to be a heavy hitter? No, but I mean, that's kind of by design. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you like the video, please do a like, and if you haven't already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.